Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy. Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an organizer and may now speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press star 1 to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast.
Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Lindsay Taylor, and welcome to Taking XML Packages to the Next Level. The goal of this webinar is stated in the title, and that is to reveal some lesser-known capabilities of XML packages to help you take them to the next level in your development. Just briefly, I want to cover the main components of the XML package. The package declaration. There are 3 handy features located here. The debug option. This will output 4 windows onto your page with debug data. You will get an output of the XSLT, the XML we are transforming, any SQL queries including your real-time parameters, and finally, the HTML source of the page. Entity helpers. If you haven't seen this feature yet, you should take a look. Set your debug to true, entity helpers to true, and you will see the entity helper node set in the XML package not the XML package, that includes your store's published entities in a hierarchy format. Allow engine. The default for this is false. So if you want to run your XML package in its own page, like we're about to do here shortly, you'll need to set this to true. SQL queries and web queries come after the package declaration. In SQL queries, you define the node names for your elements down to the row. The elements within each row are defined by your SQL query, and the nodes will match the fields selected and are case sensitive. I will cover web queries later in the session. The package transform. Here's where we get into XSLT land. We now have our XML built up and it's ready to be transformed. Here is our style sheet declaration. This is where our namespaces are defined. Global parameters. These parameters are located outside any templates and are available to all templates. And the templates. You can see the root template is matched on a /. This will execute only once. Within that root template, you may call 2 types of templates. One is a template match, and this will be executed for every node in the XML that matches the XPath in your statement. The syntax for calling this is XSL apply templates. You apply a template on a node set. The other type is a name template, and this is called by name and will only run as many times as you call it. I've divided this webinar into 3 sessions that will be demoed in real time in Visual Studio. To start out, we will cover the availability of Querystring, form post, and cookie data in the XML. The second session will cover web queries. We will take a look at publicly available web service that will give us a weather forecast for zip code that we'll pass in our query string. We will style the response in our XML package and display the forecast on the page. The final portion will cover the ability to write C# in your XML package and methods from libraries in your solution. So now to the code. So the first thing I want to cover here is query string data. So I'm going to make a new XML package that I'm going to copy from just a gutted out XML package that I've made here. I'm going to name it Querystrings.xml.config. So I'm going to make this pretty simple. Let's verify allow engine is set to true. It sure is. So now I'm going to go out to the front end of the site, and in my browser I'm going to type the XML package name, and that is Querystring.aspx. As you can see, my H1 tag is showing up here, and it's rendering just fine. So back in the XML package, I'm in the root template. I'm going to write some code here. I'm going to say if test the string length of root query string, and I'm going to call my parameter in the query string, I'm just going to make it Q. If that is greater than 0, then we are going to render that out on the page. So XSL value of select root query string Q. So there you have it. I'm going to save that. First thing, we should make sure that it is rendering and not giving us any errors. So now I'm going to pass some data into the query string with my Q parameter. Oh, and it didn't show up. So let's go back and see what I messed up. And there we have it. That looks good. And there we go. So that is how you access query string data in the XML package. Now you saw me write the X path, but for those of you that are curious and haven't seen this before, I'm going to go ahead and set debug to true. And we will take a little look at the XML. So the first window here we aren't interested in. That just displays the XSLT. We already know what that looks like. We're interested in this second debug window here, and that has the XML in it. So if we scroll down, you can see there is a query string node, and there's that Q, and so my X path was root query string Q. So now let's cover form post data. Since I'm running on version 9.3 for this demo, we can't make a form directly in our XML package and run it through the skin engine. But this gives me a chance to show you another way to access an XML package without the skin, and that is through x- your XML package name.aspx. This is really handy for running an XML package in a modal or lightbox window. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Let me scroll up here. I'm going to copy this gutted out XML package. Now let's call this one formpost.xml.config. Let me go grab that. So now let's just make sure that this is rendering fine and not giving us any errors. So x-formpost.aspx. And there we have it. So I'm going to make a little form here. that just posts to itself. And that would be x-formPost.aspx. And let's just do a little text box. We'll call it posted. Close my tag. And let's make a button. And we'll just give it a value of go. So let's make sure that's rendering out before we move on here. Whoops. Lost my page. Here we go. Ooh, X dash. There we go. So it's rendering out fine. So this isn't going to do anything right now. As you can see, it's just posting to itself, but we're not doing anything with that form post data. So let's do something with that form post data. And this is going to seem similar to what we did for the query string. We're going to say if root form posted, because that's the name of our text box. Oh, string length. So if that is greater than 0, then we want to render it out. Render it out. Posted. So let's give that a shot. Here we are. No, we don't want to repost. Let's do it this way. Hello. Go. And there you have it. Once again, I'll set the debug to true so we can take a look at the XML. Sure, let's reset it. Oh, and that's right. So when we're running it through the X dash page without this skim, we do not get the debug data. I can show you what that looks like really quick though. Let's go back to my PowerPoint. So form, you're going to get a node underneath your query string nodes that looks similar, just says form. And same thing, the child node of form will match whatever name you gave to your input. So you can have any number of inputs and post that data here, and it'll show up in your XML. And then you can transform that in your XSLT. So moving along, let's get back out of there. I'm going to close this out, and let's take a look at cookies. I'm going to name this cookies.xml.config. So for cookies, this is going to get a little bit trickier. We are going to need some JavaScript in here that will set a cookie. But first, let's just write out some of the HTML that we're going to use on the page. So I'm going to go up here, make an H1 tag, and in this content div, let's do, set the cookie. Let's make an input similar to what we had in our last form, and except for this isn't a form, we're going to execute some JavaScript when we hit the submit button. So I'm going to call this just txt cookie. And let's just give it a pass button and a value of, I'm not in a button, I'm in my textbook, or my text box, so let's just leave that be. Type equals text box. Getting ahead of myself here. All right, that looks good. That looks like a text box input. So now let's make our button. Actually, let's make that type of submit. And let's call it, I guess we don't need ID tags on here, but just for good measure, let's put it on there. Oh, yes, we do, actually. On click equals, we'll get to that. And then we will make our text say, that looks good. So the next thing we need is, well, we need to wire up this input here to set a cookie. So we are going to need some JavaScript, and I am not going to type all of that out, so I'm going to grab that real quick. You can find JavaScript to set a cookie if you just Google it. It's pretty common. I'm using jQuery on this site, so you'll see some shorthand code here. Basically what that's doing is for those of you that are familiar with jQuery, that is that syntax there for with the $.val is the same as document.getElementById.value. So I have this pre-written method that says set this cookie. So we're going to want to use that on our on click here. And let's make sure that that matches txt cookie, yes. So we're going to set a cookie. We'll call it cookie. And it's going to have the value of whatever we write into that text box. And we're going to set it for 10 days. So let's go ahead and execute that and make sure everything's running fine. e-cookie.aspx. Is it cookie or cookies? Cookies. There we go. Set the cookie. Hello. And it is probably set. We won't know until we write it out. So let's turn the debug to true and see if we have a cookie there. Sure. Okay, so down to the second debug window, we are going to look for the cookies node, and there you have it, cookies. There's the cookie that I set with hello. So let's do something with that cookie. I'm going to make another div here. And let's write it out. So root cookies, cookie. And let's take it a step further. So that's going to write it out on the page, similar to the way that we did the query string in the post. But let's make a delete button. Let's call this, doesn't really matter. The important thing here is we want to call that setCookie method. Now, the way that we would delete a cookie is we expire it. So we want to set the cookie with that value. We want to set that to -1. So we'll say it expired yesterday. So let's call setCookie. The name is cookie. The value is going to be, and here's some XSLT syntax for you, curly brackets. So if you're in HTML and you need to write out some XPath, you can do it in curly brackets. So what that will give me is the value of that cookie. So we want to set that cookie with that value. We want to set it to -1. So let's give it some text too, so we know what this button does. Looks good. Let's see if it works. Refresh the page. Oh, so there's my hello cookie. Let's change it to something else. And now it's something else. Let's delete that cookie. Oh, didn't work. Let's see what we did wrong. On click, set cookie. We've got cookie. We've got, oh, single quotes. Doesn't know what to do with that because the HTML that's rendered out with that JavaScript there thinks that my cookie value is a parameter name, which it's not. So let's try that again. We've got our something else cookie, and ta-da, we deleted it. So there you have it. Real world application. I've used this quite a bit in XML packages. One of the most common things that I've used it for over the years is handling sites that require a zip code upon your entry and maybe use that zip code throughout the site. Really handy feature. You can set that zip code cookie, pass it around various places, maybe for calculating shipping rates or some other custom logic. And then what you can do is you can make another XML package that exists like up in their header somewhere that says you've selected 97520, which is my zip code here in Ashland, and give them a link to change it. As far as Querystring goes, real-world application, you'll use that quite a bit if you already aren't. There's always a need to pass around different data to these XML packages, and that's the easiest way to access it. Form post version 9, you won't use that a lot. I could see where maybe you would be in a couple of cases. Version 8, I've used the form post stuff here and there. So that wraps up the first part of the session. I'm going to move on to something that's pretty fun. I've always had quite a bit of fun with it, and that is the web queries functionality. Web services, just in general, can be fun as long as somebody has a good API. And I found one out there just for today. I mentioned it before. We're going to use a weather forecast web service. And so let me just go ahead and start off and make the XML package for that. Let's just call it webservice.xml.config. And where did it go? There we have it. Web service. So I don't like commented out code, so I'm going to blow that away because we don't need it. But we do need this. This is a web query. The return type in this case is going to be XML. Here's where you put the URL to the web service. And then you also have the ability to pass in parameters. The difference here is that you don't define a data type like you do, and you would always want to in the SQL queries, but they exist in curly brackets. So let's go get that web service URL. I've got it open here. So this is the CDYNE weather web service. So we're going to check this out. I'm just going to copy this URL they have. Obviously, we're not using PHP, but this works. So this is the URL, and the one parameter they have for this is you can pass in a zip code. So back to our code. I'm going to paste this in here. That looks good. And I believe it was zip equals. Let's take a look at this. That was right. Question mark zip equals. Something that you might stumble into here and be just horribly confused because the error screen that you get when this happens doesn't seem to relate to the error at all. When you put your URL in here, if you have multiple parameters, like other thing, so if you had another parameter in here, you'll need to put an ampersand. That's the format. Well, that ampersand unescaped will blow up the page, and you may spend all sorts of time pulling your hair out trying to figure out that was the problem. Well, I'm telling you now, escape it, and it won't cause you a problem. But we don't have anything like that in here, so I'm going to leave that out. So we want to pass in the zip code on the query string. So I've got my query string replaced here. My replace tag, I'm just going to call it zip. My replace parameter name, I'm going to call it zip. And replace type. We have a few options here. We can pull data from an app config, we can pull it from the query string, we can pull it from the runtime data, the system data, in the XML. Well, for query string, it's going to be replace type request. And the syntax here is curly bracket zip. So now that we have that, let's just make sure that the page is happy. Oh, just make sure I know I'm on the right page as well. Save that. And here we go. Let's go to e-webservice.aspx. And we're there, and my URL didn't blow up the page, so let's move forward. So there's a couple of things here that we're going to need to do. First, let's look at the debug data. I'm going to take that XML that we're getting back here from this. The first thing you're going to see, I didn't pass in a zip code, so let's see what the web service tells us when we don't pass in a zip code. Here's our web query, the forecast return. They just tell us success is false. City could not be found in our weather data. So let's pass in that zip. I'm going to pass in 97520 because that's where I'm at. And let's check out our weather forecast. And look, we get our web query. So one thing we need to worry about here is namespace. In order to access these nodes in here, because this XML has a namespace, we're going to need to add that to our XSLT. So it will be in the style sheet declaration. We are going to want to grab, let's see here, I believe it's this, the XML and S, and that is this guy. So going back to the XML package, we're in our style sheet here. So let's add XML and S. Let's see. Yes, okay, so here's where I give it the namespace. Let's just call it W, and I'm going to paste that URL in there. That looks good. Exclude result prefixes. Need to add that W there. So let's see what the XML package does with that. And it looks just fine. Let's copy out that XML because having that debug window there is annoying and distracting. So I'm going to open up Notepad++. I'm going to paste it in here, call it XML, and we will use this for reference. I'm going to set debug to false. All right, so let's use this web service. So let's go back and look at the XML real quick. There's some things that we can use in here. The first one we're probably going to want to put in here. Let's just put the city and state. Let's write it out on the screen. So we're going to say weather forecast for XSL value of select. Let's look at our nodes. Root, web query. And here's where we get into the namespace. So anything beyond this web query is going to need to have that namespace that I defined. I believe it is a W. So it'll be W colon and then the value that we're looking for. So root, web query. Let's go E, forecast return. And actually, we're going to get sick of typing that. So let's make a parameter. Because in our XML package, we are going to be accessing that node set over and over again. So we're going to call this our node set. Select. Let's just copy this out of here. The forecast return. So let's say, now that we have that node set, I can use my XPath. So we're in the node set, and what do I want in the forecast return? Let's see what the case is on here. Okay, so state, city. So let's do city, comma, state, E, city. I'm going to copy this guy, comma, E, state. Save that. Debug's false. So let's see if this writes out for us. Prefix E is not defined. That's because it's W, not E. Okay. Let me fix my namespace there. Sorry for those of you who are watching and I confused you there for a second. Our namespace needs to match the one that we called it. And that is not working, so let's find out why. Root, web query, W forecast return. W city, W state. Am I missing something? Let's take a look. That all looks fine. Well, let's try this. Maybe it doesn't like my node set. That all looks good. Forecast return. Forecast result. No, I'm not in the result. I'm right under there, so that should be working. It's saved. What am I missing? There's something missing. Root web query, forecast return. I defined XML-on-S. Well, I did this yesterday, so let's take a look at what I did yesterday and what I'm missing here. I've got that. That looks good. Huh. Oh, exclude result prefixes. We do not want our W in there. My mistake. Still not working. Okay. Let's look at it again. Let me get rid of that node set. Forecast return, W city. That all looks good. Yeah. So, what is wrong with this? Root web query. W. Oh! Case strikes again. So, back up. Get rid of that exclusion right there. So, root of the problem. It's case sensitive. I had an uppercase C there. Ta-da! Okay, so moving along. We have weather forecast for Ashland, Oregon. Now, let's look at what this gives us. It gives us a forecast result. Let's see how many days they gave us. So cool. Looks like a 7-day forecast. So let's write this forecast out. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to make a table. I'm going to make a TR. And let's do this. Let's give it, so for every single one of those nodes, I want to write out a TD across the page. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to apply a template. So we want to make a template for these forecast nodes. So we're going to say under here, XSL template match equals namespace W, and that would be forecast. So here we have our template. Just to make sure this thing's working, let's just put some silly data in here and apply it. So what will happen is we should see a TD with hello in it for every single node that we have in our node set. Whoa, don't want another TD. Here we go. XSL apply template. Select. We just want to select it off our node set, so I don't have to type that all out again and mess up my case and cause more errors. So node set, let's go back and make sure we get it right. Forecast result. I'm just going to copy that out of the XML. And there I go with the E again, it's W. And forecast. So this gets us the node set, the forecast node set. So we should be seeing 7 hellos right out on the page. Missed something here. XSL apply templates. That's right. Try that again. And there we go. 7 hellos. So let's have some fun with this data here. I already have a div class that I'm going to steal called product wrapper. So the first thing we're probably going to want to write out is that little date that it gives us, so we know what date the forecast is. Right now, let's just pull that date right there. Let's take it, the string before the big T. So Excel value of select, string before, W date, and T. Looks good. Let's run it. String before is not a known XSLT function. That's because it is substring before. And there we have it. We have 7 days. So let's do this. I already have a set of images that I pulled from this web service site. They were nice and gave us all these images right here. So let's take a look at them so you can see what I'm talking about. I put them in my images folder. I called them weather. And there we go. So these match up with the description they give us in the forecast. So let's do this. Make that in its own div. And underneath it, let's make another div. Let's make an image with the source of images, weather. And here's where XPath comes in. We're going to say W description and oops, dot GIF. That's backwards. So the alt equals, just in case I screwed that up, let's put that W description in there. So always get the alt if the image doesn't display. And let's give that a shot. Back to our site. And that didn't work. Let's take a look at it. Oh. W description. What is it doing? Images, weather, W description dot GIF. Images, weather. Oh. The web service spells description, description. So let's copy that so we can match their spelling. And let's run it again. And now we have a bunch of visual representation of the 7-day forecast. So now that we have this, you could probably think of some of the possibilities out there. Real-world application, some things that I've done with web queries. I've integrated Google Commerce Search via these web queries. Made an XML package for both the product grid and the product display, as well as Google Commerce Search gives you facets. And I use those to create a sort of reductive grid. Super slick, super fast, because it's all just styling XML through the web service as opposed to making SQL queries for the data. Another thing that I've done real world with web queries and XML packages is an integration with a service called Edelweiss. It's a hosted content system, and they have a set of web services for product data. that work pretty slick as well. For both the grid pages, they also provided an attribute-based reductive function, as well as the ability to have data for a single product, and also a comparison feature that I built where you can select a number of products that you want to compare and open it up in a modal window, and you get a side-by-side comparison of the attributes and the pricing for all of the products that you selected. So really cool stuff, really powerful stuff. And so that concludes the web service portion. I have one portion left. We've got about 14 minutes left here, and that should be just enough time. I'm going to cover C# in the XML package. I want to give a little disclaimer here, and that is that this is not a substitute for learning XSLT if you're going to be working with XML packages. This is uncompiled code, so you need to keep that in mind for performance and maintaining your code. Yet there are customizations where you'll need to do this, so let's take a look. First thing I want to show you is in my app code, I've created a extension class, static class. I only have one method in here called getNinja, and right now it just returns Ninja. So let's make another XML package. I'm going to copy it from my blank one, and we will call this C#. So, I'm not doing anything with these guys in here, so I'm just going to blow those out. So up here in our style sheet declaration, I am going to need to add a namespace. I'm also going to need to add this XMLNS spell that right, schema dash Microsoft dash com XSLT. I'm sure you could look that up on the internet somewhere and paste that in, and it would be a whole heck of a lot easier. So that's not right. I typed that wrong. So this is XMLNS MSX SL equals MXSL equals. There we go. Now we have it. That looks good. So let's add the namespace XMLNS for what we're about to build here. So URN equals N. XMLS, and I did that backwards again. Okay, so that looks good. We have a namespace. We included the Microsoft schema for it. And now we are going to want to add that this time. And let's format our code here, because that is just ugly. So underneath the style sheet declaration, now that we have that namespace, we are going to do MSXSL. I have that backwards. MSXSL. Yeah. So we are going to use that to make a script. XSL script language equals, and you know what, we're getting short on time here and we don't have time for this to not be right, so I'm going to go in here and grab this out of what I already have. So got the whole dang thing, style sheet, MS XSL script, language C#, and I also have an assembly included, and then I have my C# in there. So let's copy that in. I'm going to get rid of this stuff right here because we're going to type it out, and I'll take you through it. So you saw me do all this, and you saw me mess it up a little bit. I don't have to type that very often, so the majority of the time I go and I grab it from somewhere I've already done it. So MS XSL script language C# implements prefix N. That is the namespace that I'm using here. I'm including an assembly. If you're doing something that isn't in your bin, you're going to want to do app code underscore namespace. If you look at my ninja.cs class, I have a ninja namespace and then the class name. So now we have the ability to call methods in that ninja extensions class. So first thing I want to do is show you how to call that method, getNinja. So public static string. Now your class name or your method names in here don't have to match the method name that you have in your assembly, but I like for them to match, so it's just easy reference. So I'm going to return my ninja extensions getNinja. So let's make sure the page runs and then it's all happy. e-c#.aspx. Got my content. It's happy. It's not throwing errors. So let's move on. Let's get the ninja. XSL value of select equals, my namespace here is N for ninja, and I'm going to call getNinja. Here we go. And there you can see that's what my ninja method returns. Also, let's take a look at doing something right in here. Let's give that a space for good measure. Public static string Adam. Let's just add two numbers together. String A, string B. Return int.parse A plus int.parse B, and our return type is string, so I'm going to toString this. Let's make sure that runs real quick. No errors. Moving forward, let's call that method. So let's say 65 plus 13 equals XSL value of select equals, same namespace, Adam. Let's just pass these right in here. Obviously, I could pass in parameters from my XML. In most cases, that's what you're going to be doing. Say you're on a product page and you've built some special, super custom rating and review system. And you're calling these methods in your library that you've built for that. And in that case, you'd probably call those methods in the product template. And so you would say XSL value select get rating with your rating namespace, and then you would pass in product ID and get the rating for that product ID, that sort of thing. But just for example's sake, I'm skipping that, and I'm just going to call Adam 6513. Looks good. Equals 78. So this concludes our session. I covered, just to go back over what we covered, query string, form post, and cookies. We covered the web query, and we also covered C# in the XML package. So this concludes the webinar, taking XML packages to the next level. I hope you learned some new things today, and thank you all for listening. This is Lindsay Taylor, over and out.